Hey gang, it's your old buddy Platt back with another Value Spirit video. I know it's been a while, I apologize. I don't think I had to tell you. The world's been a little crazy the last few months, so I just haven't gotten around to it, but I'm going to get back to doing more of these videos. And today we're going to talk about a particular spirit that I'm a huge fan of, and that is Old Granddad Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. This particular bottle I got for $18.99. Price-wise, you're looking at $18 to $21 generally, so $20 barrel generally will get you done. Little history on Old Granddad. Old Granddad was founded by a gentleman named Raymond Hayden. Remember that last name especially. It was founded in 1840 by Raymond. Raymond's family had already had kind of a history in the whiskey production, and so he created the distillery, and the family held the distillery for years. Old Granddad has been in constant production since 1840, so the brand's been around, almost 200 years now, 180 years. So again, a classic American bourbon. The brand, though, has changed hands several times. The Hayden family kept the brand up until 1899 when it sold to the Wathen family. Now, the Wathen family ended up rolling the company into something called the American Medicinal Spirit Company. And it's that term medicinal that really saved the day, because when Prohibition came around in 1920, they were able to produce medicinal whiskey for medicinal purposes. So you couldn't go to the store and buy Old Granddad yourself, but if you found a friendly doctor to write you a little prescription for that cough, you were still able to get the spirit even during Prohibition. Now, after Prohibition, the company ended up rolling into another company called National Distillers. National Distillers also produced brands like Old Crow, Old Overholt, Old Taylor, basically a lot of the old classic brands. But again, because of the history of Old Granddad, as the bird will tell you, it just worked. It was the right company to take over the brand, kind of keep their tradition. Now, National Distillers ended up eventually selling out to a company called Fortune Brands. Now, if that sounds familiar, it should, because Fortune Brands was one of the largest spirit companies in the world and has grown since. Fortune Brands eventually became Beam Incorporated, which a few years ago merged with Suntory from Japan and became Beam Suntory, one of the largest spirit companies in the world, and Old Granddad is part of their portfolio. It makes sense that Old Granddad's part of the Beam Suntory portfolio because in the 90s, Jim Beam came out with several different super premium bourbons, kind of before the super premium vodka thing started in the early 2000s. Beam was already introducing some super premium bourbons, things like Booker's and Baker's, but one of them that they came out with in 1992 was called Basil Hayden. Now, who's Basil Hayden? Basil Hayden was actually Raymond Hayden's grandfather, and the gentleman that's on the bottle, he named the bourbon after his old granddad, Basil Hayden. And again, that's who's on the bottle, and that's who Jim Beam is referencing when they came out with Basil Hayden. So again, kind of kept in the family, kind of kept the tradition, just makes absolute sense. And again, kind of reflects on how the bourbon community looked at the Hayden family. And again, we have Basil's face on the label. Old Granddad is not today as well known necessarily, or doesn't roll off the top of the head when you think of bourbons, not in the Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, Woodford kind of thing. But Old Granddad today is still one of the top selling straight whiskeys in the U.S. To define straight whiskey, has to be distilled from cereal grain, which it is, come off the still at no more than 160 proof, spend 2 years in new oak, aged in new oak for at least 2 years, and cannot go in the barrel for aging at above 125 proof. And so and that's why we get the designation Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Even though, again, it's not as popular today, at one time this was a really popular brand, and has several pop culture references. In the original Bond movie Live and Let Die, James Bond orders an Old Granddad Old Fashioned, which makes sense. Hawkeye in the TV show MASH once gave Klinger a bottle of Old Granddad as a gift, or was able to sneak it in. And then one of my favorite Old Granddad references is in a classic Hank Williams Jr. song, Women I've Never Had. He uses the line, I love sweet young things and Old Granddad. That's one of my favorite lines in that song. So that being said, let's give her a try. Alright. Oh man, there's a little heat on that nose. You get that right up front. A little light caramel. Let's give her a try. You know what? That's smooth. That is really nice and smooth. I was preparing more because it says on the bottle high rye mash bill, and I want to say I read where it's like 27% of the mash bill. And again, that's generally a lot higher. A lot of times you'll see rye at 8 to 10%, and even the softer bourbons like Makers, you know, hardly any rye. But this is an older blend when older bourbons were a little more rye aggressive, a little spicier, a little more of a bite. For something having that much rye, it's still got the classic bite. You still definitely pick up the rye in there, but it's not as aggressive as I thought it'd be. That being said, though, I do see why this bourbon is great in an old-fashioned, because of the addition of sugar in that drink. The rye bite, almost like a spiciness, complements that well. This is really good in a mint julep. Actually, a little bit of info out here in Vegas. At one time, Old Granddad was the house bourbon at the Bellagio. So when they made their, you know, again, their classic old-fashioned stuff like that, the original recipe called for Old Granddad. And again, the mint julep with all that sugar, that rye bite works. But that is actually, I'm really impressed how smooth this is. And it's been a while since I've had Old Granddad without like a mixer or something like that. But man, that is a good bourbon for under $20. That's tough to beat. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.